This is the Mentor Moments podcast. My name is Brayton Wooters, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Michael Keener. On Mentor Moments, we take the time to interview counseling professionals and personal mentors. We hope you enjoy this episode and keep tuning in. All right, let's get rolling. On this episode of Mentor Moments, we have Chris Seigel here with us. Chris is from St. Louis Counseling. Chris, what do our listeners need to know about you, about your journey, kind of what has brought you to St. Louis Counseling, and how have you ended up where you are today?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking to both of you about this. So my journey is a little bit of a late bloomer for the field, right? So this is my second career. My first career was about a decade in retail, and that's definitely a lifestyle. It's challenging. I say that everybody in the country should have to work 6 months in retail and 6 months serving at a restaurant, and we'd have a much more polite society. So I did that for about 10 years, and it was really rewarding. It was a great experience. I learned a lot. I guess the thing I've learned most is no matter what the business is it if it's mental health or retail or finance or plumbing, it's really about relationships, right? It's about the relationships with your coworkers and the teams you lead, and in retail it's with customers, and here it's clients. In my late 30s, I had a very close friend who went through some stuff, and counseling and therapy changed their life, saved their life. Although I had loved retail, I always knew I wanted to do something else, but I didn't know what. And my wife and I would talk. I'd be like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. What if I go back to school for business? And she's like, and do what? I'm like, I don't know. Or what if I do this? And then I was like, this is it, right? So I came to mental health, social services. Graduated from OBAP, and my first job in the field was working with individuals involved in the criminal justice system, probation or parole, and substance use disorder. So they had motivation if they didn't stop using. And at that time, it was abstinence model. There was not a harm reduction model. I'm not certain, but I would probably venture a guess in the criminal justice system, it's still abstinence, right? And we know that can be kind of dangerous. So that their motivation was to stop using it or go back to prison and lose their freedom, right? And it was really, really rewarding. Enjoyed the work, learned a lot. I was not a young person, but I was young in my career, and I made some missteps, and I learned a lot about that. Brayton had asked me about some pivotal moments. And I think my pivotal moment is not a single moment, but it's a lot of grace. I received a lot of grace in my career to make mistakes, learn from them, and get better. As I was working with these individuals involved in the criminal justice system, I was like, man, we're spending all this money on the back end, right? We're doing treatment in prison and emergency rooms for substance use disorders. My last position with that organization, I was doing statewide reentry. So I was going into the prisons with men about to be released, making sure they had insurance and employment and housing and things like that. So I said, man, what if we spent this money up front? So then I moved on. I prayed on it. I moved on to an agency that did emergency shelter and transitional living for youth, right? And said, let's see if we can avoid some of these people getting to prison and getting to treatment and getting to the ERs. I did that work. When I went to my second agency, I said, no more supervision. I just want to come in. I want to do therapy. I kind of want to just see my clients, work with the team, and then go about it. And God kind of chuckled at me. I made this plan, and he said, not so much. And he kept putting these leadership opportunities in front of me. So there I became program manager, and then ultimately chief program officer at that agency. And so brings me to St. Louis Counseling. Really wasn't looking for a job when I saw this. But I saw it was intriguing. Again, I prayed on it, and here I am. So I've been here a little over a year. I don't know what you gentlemen know about St. Louis Counseling, but we are a ministry of Catholic Charities. So in very much every sense of the word, St. Louis Catholic Charities is St. Louis Counseling. St. Louis Counseling is Catholic Charities. What's really cool about that is we're just one of 9 ministries within Catholic Charities. So if we put all those ministries together, we'd be the largest nonprofit in the state. But I think we've done a really bad job of communicating that to the public. I don't think most people know that. I don't think they know that, like, St. Patrick's Center is part of Catholic Charities, or Mary Grove, or St. Martha's. We need to do a better job of that PR. So at St. Louis Counseling, we're part of the Catholic Charities Mental Health Substance Use Disorder Service Line. Our partner agency is Queen of Peace Center. They do substance use disorder treatment for women and children. What's really cool about their program is so often women have to choose between getting healthy and getting treatment, or taking care of their children. Here, they can bring their children with them during treatment. So we share a CEO, Sharon Spruill's our CEO over both of those organizations, and we work very closely together. We share therapists, we share trainings. So it's really creating more impactful outcomes, and we're able to better serve those communities that we're in. But specifically for St. Louis Catholic or for St. Louis Counseling, 5 offices in the area. Our main office is here in Fenton. We're in O'Fallon, Missouri, soon to be St. Peters, Troy, Union, and Herculaneum. And then we're embedded in 125 plus schools in the area, all the way from Troy out to Washington County down to Perryville County or Perry County. We have therapists, from 1 to 5 days in those 125 buildings. So they're really ingrained in the culture of there. I kind of joke that we don't do a lot. We're not into case management and housing that. We do therapy. And what's good for that is we're kind of the Swiss Army knife, right? We fit in every organization, every agency, every ministry has a mental health need. So that's the role we fill in the communities that we serve.
Chris, I was really struck when you were talking about grace and just thinking about it from both. You said you were provided grace, right? To sort of like be trusted to sort of try, and if you make mistakes or whatever. But to me, right, that's sort of the heart of the therapeutic relationship as well, right? By giving that same thing to the clients or people we're working with for that dual process. So I don't know, that was just, I don't know, I would hope our listeners could really sort of hear that and take that in a little bit and just really think about, I don't know, having that and maybe even grace for yourself, right? So maybe, yes, you need to have a supervisor to sort of give you that, but just forgive yourself and again, maybe that's a client yourself perspective as well, right? To kind of, yeah, it's okay. We're human, we make mistakes, but again, being in that environment of grace.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, especially about the having grace with yourself, right? I tend to, I could take a test and get 95 out of 100 right, but I'm going to focus on those 5, right? And I need to really focus on the 95. I think what would help me with the grace and the people who gave me grace and when I can give it now, and I don't always do it perfectly, is really assuming positive intent, right? So if I'm working with somebody and they make a mistake, or at home, right? Oh my gosh, my son left dirty dishes in the sink again, right? Well, maybe he didn't get to the dirty dishes because someone didn't show up at work and he ran off early to start his shift early. He's really being a responsible employee helping out his organization. I need to assume there's a reason he didn't get to that, right? So I try and assume positive intent as much as I can. And I think that makes grace giving a little bit easier. And I love how you connected that to the therapeutic relationship as well, both for therapist and client, right? The client could be working really hard, but not seeing the results. Well, that's why when we need to be process oriented and not results oriented, right? But also with the therapist. And I'm doing a licensure supervision for a therapist. And just recently we had a conversation of, yeah, you're going to make a mistake with the client, right? And all you can do is be authentic, own that mistake, be honest with the client, and say, hey, we're gonna move forward together on this. And if you're being present for them, if you're being authentic with them, guess what? They're going to assume positive intent and they're going to move on with you. So yeah, grace is a powerful thing. I think our society as a whole could use more grace right now.
I'm going to go off script on you a little bit. One of the things Brayden and I have been talking a lot about is strengths, whether it's like Clifton strengths, the VIA character strengths. I don't know if you've taken any of those, but just positivity, gratitude. Again, to me, I'm seeing connections. You talk about sort of, again, without knowing your counseling theory, I hear a lot of solution focused in you. You pursue positivity or, presuppose change. I don't know. So just, I don't know what my question is there, but.
Yeah, so you looked at kind of solution focused and really brief solution focused. My theoretical orientation. So when I finished my psychology degree, to say you were eclectic was not a good thing. By the time I got to grad school, it was all about being eclectic and taking what worked for the different orientations, right? Yep. And I saw something on LinkedIn that said, hey, we're not saying that theoretical orientation isn't important, but it's about being authentic. It's about being present there, right? So, CBT, motivational interviewing, and all of that. But, I've really kind of been looking at how long some of our clients are engaged in therapy here. And some of them, to me, seem to be exceedingly long. Now, there's really complicated cases, and sometimes that's the need. But I really want to, and I'm not ready to kind of really shift this focus yet. But I think, especially for the new fiscal year coming up, really start looking at, do we need to implement some more solution focus and brief solution focus interventions with our clients? I believe that the answers reside within the client, right? We don't do anything for the client. Somebody a therapist said to me, well, what if I can't move the client from here to there? I go, we don't move clients, right? All we do
Yep.
is we create an environment where it's possible for them to move themselves, right? You're not going to work harder than a client. You're going to walk side by side with them. So I believe the answers reside in the clients themselves. I think some of the most powerful sessions I've had has been, I talk very little. And the client just kind of talks it out. And as it's going on, you can see them kind of unraveling this mess in their head. And they get the end, they're like, oh, well, this is what I should do. I didn't do that. I hopefully created an environment where they were able to do that on their own, but I didn't move the client. I didn't move the client anywhere. I only have control of myself, and I'm still working on that at times. But yeah, we can't make anybody do anything. Even in my first agency, when for lack of a better term, quote unquote, there was a stick of going back to prison. That wasn't enough. The having some ODing wasn't, and having to get Narcan wasn't enough, right? And we know that the three of us and a lot of people who will be listening to this know that with substance use disorder, you're not going to stop until you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I can't make someone be sick and tired. But when they are, I can maybe give them some tools for their toolbox and create an environment where they can try and get healthy.
I want to be mindful of like other questions because I feel like there's so many avenues we could go down. Just speaking to how you present yourself professionally, present yourself as both a clinician and also the person with leadership. What are those like key qualities, attributes that have made you, really effective in your roles?
As far as how I try and behave, and not perfectly, I think the first thing is I try and act with integrity and authenticity, right? I try and, integrity is pretty straightforward. I try and be the same person every day when I walk in the building. We've all probably had those supervisors that were kind of up and down.
Mm-hmm.
We had to kind of get the temperature of what was going on that day. And are we going to get bagels and coffee because we did great? Or are we going to get ignored because X, Y, and Z? I try to be middle of the boat, right? I want everybody on my team, my directors, all my coworkers to kind of expect the same Chris every day. Not perfectly, right? I get crabby or I might get really excited about something, but I really try and stay in the middle of the boat. And then I think the other piece, and this is, I think something that comes with, for me, a lot of maturity. It's one of the benefits of getting older. Again, going back to a lot of grace is emotional intelligence and empathy. I really have to focus on that, right? So I think that emotional intelligence goes back to the middle of the boat, controlling your emotions. Things are gonna happen when there's a situation, there's a crisis that shoots to 10. I think leaders have to get to a 6, right? And if the crisis is 12, then we need to go to 5. It's kind of an inverse. I always say that if I'm panicking about something really bad went wrong. So maybe it's time for everybody to go home. So I try and maybe duck on water, that expression of, kind of come on top, paddling really hard underneath. And then, right, I try and be as transparent as possible, right? Whatever I can share with our team and coworkers, I do. I don't hoard information. If I can't tell somebody something or don't want to, I'll say that. Hey, Joe, I can't tell you that. It's not ready, or, I'm not ready to share that with the team. But as soon as I am, I will. And it's not to silo information. It's not a power thing. It's just sometimes, we have conversations with leadership and it's half baked and you don't want to roll that out to the team until it's done, because then you lose credibility. We're like, hey, we rolled this out, but it didn't work and we're going to redo it. And people just kind of start rolling their eyes. So I think that, that integrity, authenticity, emotional intelligence, and good and communication and transparency. Again, not perfect. You can ask my team, and specifically, you can ask my wife, maybe. But that I try and operate pretty much the same in my personal and professional life. Right? You're not going to see a vastly different person if you're at a house for the barbecue. I kind of am who I am. That doesn't mean that I don't know my character defects and I work on self-awareness, but I just I try and be authentic as much as I can.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Brayton.
Well, I'm just noticing like consistency, right? I think of like showing up as the same kind of version as yourself. I mean, that's something that we want to model, I think, for our clinicians so that they can model that for their clients. I think that that's something that's incredibly important. One thing that really struck me, and you mentioned it earlier, which is assuming positive intent. That's a big learning thing that I'm working through right now personally, is I can assume positive intent with my clients. How do I carry that over to my coworkers and the people that I work with? So,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
those are my initial thoughts. Dr. Keener, what were you thinking?
Well, again, I was struck when Chris was talking about being authentic, and
Mhm.
we've sort of met here for 20 minutes, and again, I feel Chris saying that or being that. It feels like it's a way of being for you, not just, oh, this is the speech that I need to say, right? I guess I'm trying to compliment you on just, even in a virtual space, I'm feeling the positive energy and that the genuineness, and again, the positive intent. So,
Yeah,
well,
thank you so much, Dr. Keener. I appreciate that. I'll be honest, and some days I do it really well, and then other days, and not so great. But that's when I have to give myself some grace and be like, you didn't do so great in this area today. But you can't beat yourself up over it. And so that's why I try and give that to other individuals as well. So I think it's only fair after those kind words. There's things I struggle with too, right? So I'll be honest with you, I'm really, really bad with self-care. It's something that in the last probably 90 days I've really had to focus on because I've felt the consequences of that, right? I think some of it's generational. Even as a young, especially in retail, there was no self-care. We didn't talk about work-life balance, right? And I don't love the work-life balance term, right? Because for me, that sounds like something that you achieve and then you're done, right? I think it's always maybe work-life integration, but it's always balancing, right? Sometimes you're going to work 40 hours a week. Sometimes you have to work 55 hours a week. So it's not a one-time off. Like I've achieved balance, I'm good, right? So maybe work-life integration. So, I'm really poor with self-care. What I've come to realize is one, real life consequences for Chris when I don't do that. And it's a terrible example for your team. I don't think anything of if I can't sleep at night, sending an email at 2 o'clock, but now I've just told my directors, now that's the expectation from them, right?
Yep.
I think nothing of checking my email on vacation, because not knowing what is going on sometimes gives me more stress than knowing. But again, now I just told everybody on my team that when you're on vacation, you better be checking your email, right? So there's ways around that. I still don't sleep at night. I'm still going to do email, but now I set the time to go out during normal business hours, right? I'm still checking my email and I'm reading it, but guess what I'm not doing? I'm not responding, so no one knows that, right? So I appreciate the nice words, and I think there's some things I do well. I'm going to give myself that grace, but there are things I still struggle with, right? And that self-care is something that's front of mind because the consequences are real.
It was interesting you saying that. I think we can do a little bit of a transition in our talk. I've noticed, I don't know what version of Microsoft that I have now, but I am somebody that, right or wrong, I love feeling productive. So even if it's a couple hours, I do come to work on the weekends, right? And I notice when I type an email now on the weekends, a little box comes up that says, you should send, during work hours, so, yeah, okay, so again, that kind of reminder. But again, so maybe my shift question is sort of in your role, how have you seen AI sort of help counseling? Again, being a chief program officer, how are you using it? How are you investigating it? How do you see it, benefiting counseling?
So it's a big question, a lot to unpack there, right? So we have not implemented any type of portion of AI yet. So I think a big reason I'm sitting here right now. So recently I had the privilege of going to NatCon. It was here. So I'm sure you guys know the biggest mental health conference in the country. It was fantastic. And we were sitting there and day after day after day, it was AI, AI, AI. And I've mentioned my prayer life and it's important to me, and I believe that God talks to me through other people, right? And I keep hearing AI, AI, AI. And I came back, kind of thought about it and prayed on it. I went to my CEO. I said, Sharon, we got to figure this out, right? Some of the stuff they were showing at NatCon was amazing. They were talking about being able to diagnose people with COVID before they literally have COVID through AI and smart pills and the bracelets you watch and give you all your biometrics, and it's really amazing. And I think the medical field is really kind of run more with AI than the mental health field. So we went there and I said, we need to figure this out. So internally we started an AI steering committee because I have a huge capacity for change, and that's both a blessing and a curse, right? So I'm like, AI, let's go. Like, I'm ready. Let's start it all over AI. But other people aren't there, and that's a very, very good thing, right? The last thing we want is a Skynet situation, right, with AI. But and I probably should have said this earlier. With AI, I do not believe, and no one wants that AI is going to replace people, right? I think what will happen is people who utilize AI properly will replace people who don't, if that makes sense. So went to NACOC, came back, started the steering committee. So we've not really implemented anything, right? We're taking it slow. A lot of, like I said, I have a huge capacity for change, but most of the people are like, oh, I don't know, still a little freaked out by this, don't really understand it, which is my case as well, but I see the huge benefits of it. There's been huge advancements in AI when you start talking about, you can talk about, well, ChatGPT, right? That's kind of what everybody knows, and it's a great tool, but it's just a tool. You can't just say, hey, give me a policy on absenteeism, plug it in ChatGPT, cut and paste it into your P&P, right? It's just a starting spot. Autonomous vehicles, a huge AI in finance and retail, e-commerce. But AI in healthcare, we kind of talked about the physical part of healthcare, but what I've discovered on my journey of kind of self-education and reaching out to people is it's really undefined in that mental health nonprofit space. And that's kind of what I alluded to earlier, is it's there, we want to use it. We have this great tool, but no instruction manual for it. And the problem or the challenge or the opportunity, however you want to phrase it, is that by the time we start getting our arms around it, we as a society, it's evolved again, right? Sam Altman, the CEO of ChatGPT, who, depending on who you speak to, is like the smartest person ever, or going to bring about the destruction of humanity. He said, we're on ChatGPT 4, I think, and he said 4.5 is close, and it'll make 4 look stupid. And 4, his words, not mine. And 4 is pretty good, right? So it's evolving. So on that AI steering committee, we're really looking at key stakeholders. We're looking at partners in academia. We're looking at partners in healthcare. And then additional challenge for us, being a Catholic organization, is also implementing in line with Catholic teaching, and really digging into that. We're working with some priests in the area. The challenge is that, the Pope and the Vatican has made some comments about AI, but they're kind of in the same boat as us. They don't really know what direction to give because we're not sure what the capabilities are and things like that. So we're looking at it. We're hoping by the end of the year to make some recommendations to our CEO. And I'll be honest, the recommendation may not be, hey, we're not ready for this, or it's not really going to benefit us. I don't think that's the case. I think the real benefit we're going to see is in administrative tasks, right? We know the top 3 reasons that clinicians leave jobs are related to admin, right? Right? You have a caseload, correct?
Correct. Nope.
What's the least favorite part of your job?
Right. Notes.
Right.
Yep.
So if we could develop a system, if we could not develop it, if we could invest in a system that would say cut your documentation time in 50%, I'm guessing you think that would be a benefit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's where that opportunity is. Now, you run into some challenges with that. You need to make sure the systems aren't biased and that they're fair. There's concerns with HIPAA and privacy and confidentiality. One of the biggest issues is informed consent and transparency, and for me, explainability. Right. So if we had a system that was going to help a clinician with notes, all these systems record the session, right? Well, okay, now that's HIPAA. Like, who owns that? Do we own it? Does the outside party own it? If I'm a client, well, where's that going? When's it get destroyed? Who's listening to it, right? And then just to even explain AI, right? I can't explain ChatGPT to people. I can use it, right? But it's hard to explain. So I think the role that we're looking for at the end of the day, what I want to do is reduce the administrative burden on our coworkers so they can spend more face-to-face time with clients, grow the number of lives we serve, and fulfill our mission. I want it to be complementary to the human work, not replacing the human work.
The first thing that pops into my brain from what you just shared, I remember I was watching a video that it was a bunch of graphic designers talking about how do you draw an AI was basically what they were talking about, was like making an icon. They don't even know what AI looks like. So how do you, it's this thing that can do everything, yet we can't see it, how do we market it, share it with people in a way that like makes sense with our eyes? And then,
and it's interesting you bring that up, because one of the articles I read was talking about, disparities in education in underserved communities, right? And could AI level that playing field? And the authors came to the conclusion that it would actually widen that gap, because AI is only good if you're asking the right questions, right? It's like any other system. If you're not putting in the right information, you're gonna get the wrong information out, right? And so it could widen that gap because, if unfortunately, that underserved community is lagging behind in their education, they're not going to be putting in the right information versus another school system that's further ahead, right? So it could actually kind of inadvertently widen that gap, which seems to happen quite a bit in a lot of things we try and do. It's the best intent, but we don't kind of see those unforeseen consequences.
Oh, you had mentioned something. It'll come to me later. Dr. Keener, what's coming up for you?
Well, I guess I was really excited to hear everything Chris said about it, right? Like it's a tool, right? So how do we use it to help us, to give us more time to do what we want to do, or could be more productive in doing? Actually, I'm going to stop there for a second. I had a conversation with somebody. It's like, well, if AI is helping us be more productive, should we be paid more now because we sort of can be more productive? Like, or do I work less? Because if it cut my time 50% in half, then do I get, is that the benefit for me that now I can, that's I guess another bigger question there. But just again, I like the idea of it's a tool, and I love your idea of, if I understood it correctly, like it won't take away jobs from the good therapists or the good counselors, right? But it may, if you're not the good one, maybe somebody, again, will find another avenue, right? Whether it's AI or another person.
Yeah, so I think people who utilize AI are going to have an advantage, right? So, if say a therapist was underperforming, but then you looked at it and say we had a scribe system that was I'm not sure if you're familiar. I'm sure you're familiar with these systems. One of them is Elios, right? So basically, it records the session is done, the therapist goes in and it had started the note for you already. Now, the note's not done. They're going to have to tweak it, but they say almost initially off the bat, it reduces it by about 50%. And of course, AI is smart. It starts learning. It'll learn the difference between the three of us, how we talk. It'll call out like, hey, just so it'll say, hey, the client mentioned anxiety 4 times in session. Are you aware of that? It'll say, it looks like you're using elements of CBT. Here's some suggested interventions. Now, I think where a therapist may, decide to move on is if you dig into that and you have this therapist that's really performing and they're hitting productivity because they're utilizing the system they were given because they've kind of embraced the change in AI. And then another therapist who's kind of resistant to, right? They're not sure about AI. They don't trust it. They just assume their clients aren't going to, well, they're going to struggle, right? And you're going to see that in productivity. You're going to see that in no-show rates and things like that. So that's where I kind of say AI will not replace people, but people who use AI will replace people who don't.
Well, the other thing that makes me think of this conversation is like big data as well. Like, so how are we, as counselors, therapists, doing outcome data on our work? Like, again, number of sessions, or again, I know my colleague here, Bob Bertolino, and it works with Brayton at Youth in Need, and doing, sort of plotting out outcome rating scales into sort of, okay, kind of like you're saying there, well, there's this point, there's a critical point, we need to address this at the next session. And so again, how can we be, if it's efficient or more effective, maybe is a better word, kind of moving beyond competence and being effective. So
yeah, absolutely. And you brought up, if I reduce my workload by 50% and produce more as a compensation. So, if we had a system that was reducing documentation time, I wouldn't then expect the clinician to see more clients. The benefit for us would be for the next session, they're going to be fresher. They're going to be present. They're not going to be thinking about writing their notes. They're not going to get backed up on their notes. Right? Yeah. Have you ever been backed up on your notes? How's that feel? I've been backed up, right?
Oh, terrible. Yeah.
And I'm very clear with you. I was not a timely note taker, right? And then it creates clinical issues because I don't know what I had for dinner 3 nights ago, let alone what was said in that session. Okay. So anything that we can do to get those clinicians back in front of their people more, that's the key. That's why everybody got in the helping profession, was to help. So absolutely. I wouldn't expect that clinician to see more clients. I probably wouldn't then I would just want them to be healthier, right? We talked about self-care, healthier, more present, and available for their clients. So, and then we'll see the benefit of that in our outcomes, right?
AI and technology is something that I feel very strongly about, and I love talking about it. And so one of the projects that I volunteered for was taking a look at our policies and procedures at Youth in Need, and taking a look, because we have nothing written on AI. And y'all took the avenue of forming a committee. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of brings me into our next kind of question, which is ethical considerations, how you're going about it. But I'm wondering if maybe I should get a group of committees. What has that experience been like for you, I suppose?
Well, I think the committee is always, it's always great. Nobody wants more meetings, but what people do want is to be able to leverage the collective brain power of the team, right? So I think the biggest, we talked about some ethical considerations and things like that. The biggest thing I think is bias, within these systems, right? Even if it's unconscious bias, right? If the system's built with bias, whatever comes out of that system is going to have bias. So I think a good way for us to address that is to have a very eclectic team, right? So we have almost every level of both our agencies, and this is a joint effort between St. Louis Counseling and Queen of Peace, because if you remember, we're a service line, so we do all these things together now. So we have everything from myself to the COO at Queen of Peace, to a couple therapists, to our manager of our EHR, to the executive assistant, to our CEO's on it, because she's into tech. When we created the team, I said, sometimes you're asked to volunteer for stuff. Sometimes you're told to do stuff. Sometimes you're voluntold. This was completely voluntary, right? So I went to people and said, if you're interested in this, please go ahead and join the committee. And some people were like, no interest. Tech's not my thing. You guys figure it out and let me know how to work it, right? And so the group of people want to be there. One, for sure, wants to be there almost exclusively for these considerations. That was their thing. They have they're not fearful of AI. And I use that term for lack of a better one, but they are concerned about the bias, especially in communities of color, right? So we're able to rate almost every level of the agency to this committee, a lot of different ages on the committee, different levels are points in their career, and then we have two committee members of people of color. So I think that's a huge benefit. I think when you are making decisions for a group of people and there's not someone at the table that looks like the group of people you're looking at, I don't know how accurate your decisions really are. So yeah, I think promoting diverse representation, even when we find stakeholders, is huge. And then the other piece, besides that bias, is Dr. Keener had kind of mentioned, it was the data, the big data. Where's all this information going? Because that's what I'd want to know. If I was sitting in the client chair and you were recording my session, where's that going to go? And I'm not sure you can ever convince me the truth, right? I'm always there doing something with that, right? So I think if any agency, if we go down the road with a partner agency to develop this, we have to have assurance of what's going to happen with that data. Who owns it? If they own it, how long? Where's it go? When is it destroyed? And things like that. So yeah, I think the bias, encourage collaboration, diverse teams, establish policy and procedure brain, like you had talked about. Like that's create something that's create some guardrails here of what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, what's the line we're not going to cross, right? Like we can go up to here, but we're not going to go there. And I just think that group of people, the collective brain power is so valuable.
And this might be more for like the end. I don't know if this is something that we were going to save for like a mentor moment or not, but I'm wondering, with all the ethical considerations, all of the things to be quote unquote wary of, I think it'd be really easy for a clinician or even like a whole nonprofit organization, a group practice, to just say, nope, we don't want any part of it, keep our hands off of it, don't want to touch it. So for those that maybe don't have the resources, don't have like a whole group of committee, don't have that, would we recommend they keep their hands off? How do they go in, I think? What are our thoughts, I suppose?
I mean, the resources is a concern, right? If we're talking about especially nonprofit space, these systems are expensive, right? And so, if you're a smaller private practice or a smaller agency of 10 or 15 people, it may not be feasible for you. But what my suggestion would be that if you're interested, you still delve into it, right? And you still learn about it, what works, what doesn't work, where it's going. Because who knows whenever a grant opportunity, like the Gates Foundation, they have tech grants. Who knows when a grant's going to come, maybe some grassroots funding for agencies no bigger than 15 people, and this is where you want to go. There may be agencies that do exactly what we do, form the committee and be like, not for us. That would be their decision. I believe that it'll be hard to keep pace, right? If I can advertise, hey, if I can create a job posting that says, are you a therapist that hates to write notes? Cool, come work for us, right? Versus an agency that's still doing pen and paper, notes. That's the real world business application. That's an advantage for us, right? The mission work advantage is better care, serving more people. right?
Absolutely.
So I think agencies can make that, and some agencies may want to move forward and won't be able to. So that's all stuff I think that, it's in that vast landscape. It's just, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. Is cost going to skyrocket or will cost go down as more, startups get in this space? It's just, it's unknown. But what I know is that I think this horse is too far out of the barn to put it back. I mean, it's out there, it's in the wild. So the best we can do is try and learn how to leverage it to our clients' benefit.
Chris, this really has been a great conversation. I'm just sort of wanting more. I think, we just need to, maybe the three of us should just meet weekly just to have a conversation.
Oh,
right?
that'd be great.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like share with our listeners your mentor moment. What's a task or a homework or something for them to think about? What do you have to share with us?
This was an interesting one. I think something to reflect on is think about your role in whatever field you're in and what you could accomplish if you had great daring and a no fear to fail mentality. I think if that was your perspective, you would be willing to take bold, calculated risks. I think you'd be more inclined to pursue really innovative ideas. And I think ultimately, it would foster resilience and a culture of continuous learning within your organization, right? Now, that's easier said than done, right? Because there's real world consequences to failing. But if you have a real fear to fail in your role, I would challenge you to look at your team, your supervisors, like where's that coming from? And I'm not saying run away from that position, but what can you maybe do to alleviate that fear, to reduce that fear? And I think to maybe come full circle, I think the answer may be grace, right? If I know I'm going to receive grace, I'm going to go ahead and take that risk. So that doesn't mean that doesn't mean you go just 180 from your mission of your organization. Remember I said calculated risk, right? Of like, you know what? I know in 6 months, this program would really be ready to launch, but it's really needed now. And if we do this and this, I think we can go for it, man. Just take that chance. If it's going to help the communities that we're in, if it's going to help the people and the families we're serving, take that risk and kind of lose that fear of failure. Because even if you do fail, for lack of a better term, failure holds key data and valuable lessons, right? And you better learn from it, because there's no point in going through the consequences of failure without taking something away from it.
I think that was awesome. I mean, that might be one of the best mentor moments we've had. So
I appreciate that. That's
great.
kind of you.
Yeah. Again, you tied it all up, in a nice little bow, kind of gave us our thought and then wrapped it up with grace, right? So
yeah. Chris, we thank you so much for being on this episode of Mentor Moments and sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your personality with us. This has just been a really, really great time. So thank you.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a pleasure to talk to both of you, and maybe hopefully our paths cross in the future.